Good evening to you all. Thanks very much for staying on this evening. I know it's been a long day of writing and a long 2 days of writing, and tomorrow another day. But glad that you're able to wait on for this talk, because I'm absolutely delighted to have Owen here with us. This is we're here to talk about Owen's most recent book, The Garfield Conspiracy. And going to just talk about the story itself and the project that he's worked on, and also talk a bit about working with historical background. So tell us a bit about your, so really welcome Owen, and thanks for coming along this evening. And just tell us a bit about your background as a writer, how you got into writing in the first place, and what led you to this point.
I started writing shortly after I got married.
Mm-hmm.
Which is 24 years ago last week. And it was something that I wanted to do, that I'd always wanted to do. It wasn't until I suppose, got into a settled routine after being married that I just decided to try it. Mm. And I started off with short stories and entered a few competitions. And then I wrote a novel then, 2003, and self-published it. But I've been writing ever since. And then I got together with Sean. When was that, Sean? About 4 years ago, was it? About 4 years ago. And, worked with Sean. He was did a lot of work with Sean. He was very helpful, editing and getting things together. And then we brought out Number Games. And then I think that was 2019. And then last year, we brought out the Garfield Conspiracy. So it's been a long time. Mm-hmm. It's a long time. But I've been writing systematically.
Yes.
Ever since then,
Excellent stuff. And the Garfield Conspiracy is, I've just got it this week. I was very excited to read it, because I didn't know much about the assassination. Can you just give us a kind of a premise of the book, the outline of the story?
Okay. So when I originally started out to write this book, I wanted to write it as an historical novel. Mm-hmm. Just purely historical, from the point of view of the murder mystery surrounding the assassination. Mm-hmm. But I was struggling with that. And then I decided to write the book about a writer who was struggling with that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then, of course, embellished and exaggerated. So I ended up writing a book about a writer who's writing a book about the assassination of President Garfield, and has we think he has a nervous breakdown anyway as he's writing it. Mm. And he begins to be visited by the characters that he's researching. And then, again, embellishing and exaggerating things, I brought a young assistant into it, and he begins to have an affair with the young assistant. And then the characters that he's researching and interviewing are interviewing him back and asking him what the hell he's doing with his life, running around with this young one when he has a happy marriage and all this kind of stuff. So it's a little bit funny from that point of view. So, but it's really about the murder mystery unravels through these interviews from primary sources, if you like. And we don't know whether they're figments of his imagination or ghosts or what they are. You have to figure that out yourself.
I was going to ask you that, actually, because I thought that was it was quite an interesting device. As somebody that studies narrative devices, and I've done a lot of kind of research on it, and different writers have different techniques, but to have somebody researching something, and the people that were involved in the research, in the actual event that he was researching from 100 years ago, visiting them, so I guess, are they ghosts? I suppose was the question I was going to ask you. Were they ghosts, or they are figments of his imagination?
Well, you said the word there. They are a device. Like when I was researching, when I was still doing the historical novel phase, and I was researching this, there was a lot of gaps in the research. Like you never meet these people because they were never recorded because it was so long ago. And the only kind of record you have for them these were politicians, so their speeches in Congress, which is all very formal. So I was thinking to myself, how can you get to know these people really? You can't really get to know what was going on, and without making up stuff that's not going to be plausible. Mm-hmm. So I thought, let's bring these characters in and interview them directly. And how would I do that? And then I brought in this concept of bringing them as ghosts or figments of his imagination. But at least they were primary sources then. You could play around with that more.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that about the research, like your own research. I guess you didn't have the ghosts visiting you, telling you about this.
No. Not really.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I did a lot of research. I really enjoy researching, and there's a lot of research available online, as you probably all know at this stage. And you can get into the New York Library of Congress, which has all the primary source documents there. So it's a great resource.
Yeah,
and there's a couple of very good books written about the period as well, which I used and tapped into.
Super. And like, is this kind of an area writing about historical events? Is that something you're really interested in doing more of? Writing about historical events around a fiction or around fictional characters?
Yes, it is something I'm interested in doing more of. I'm currently working on another book which is not an historical novel, so I am kind of thinking in the back of my mind, if I get this one done and out of the way, I would like to look at maybe more recent history. But I haven't got anything figured out yet. But it is a very interesting area.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually.
The assassination referred to any particular president? Or is it all fiction?
No, it did happen, yeah. It happened in 1881. It was the second president after Abraham Lincoln to be assassinated. So, and no one was really sure. They knew who assassinated him, but they weren't really sure what the motive was behind it. And that's where the mystery is. Yeah, it's an interesting story.
It's not a whodunit as much as a
why done it.
Why done it? Yeah,
it's more of a why done it.
We've often talked about it in class about the kind of another level, and it is an interesting book because it's got historical fiction, but it's got like a crime, a murder mystery scenario as well, and that so it really has kind of a few different aspects to it. Does that period interest you a lot, the 19th century? Is that a period you'd go back to again?
Possibly, yeah. I think that it's a very influential period in American history because this is the start of America becoming a superpower. It was after the Civil War and before the 20th century. This is when their industrial kind of boom happened and made them the country they are today. So I think and it was a relatively peaceful period other than for this assassination. So therefore you don't hear much about it.
So so like the theme is freedom of the conference. Did you find it kind of restrictive to be working with the facts of the Garfield assassination, the real characters, because you kind of blend in real characters with the Richards character and his situation? He gets into an affair. And Valerie is there, so you've got a kind of a fairly contemporary kind of ménage à trois sort of situation going on, and then you have actual facts. So did you find that kind of tricky to work around? Because I don't write with facts at all. I can keep in the fiction world all universe unless I'm doing academic writing. So did you find that difficult? Did you find it kind of restrictive?
I actually found it very helpful. I found it very helpful because, as you'll know, Martin, it's very hard to get a structure and framework when you're writing. It's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? To try and keep everything in sequence and everything in order. But if you can build a story around something that's already happened, that for me anyway, that was a handy framework. You know, you could work on that. So I didn't find it difficult. I actually found it helpful for me.
Right. Yeah. Because we've been talking so much at the weekend about that kind of the different approaches to writing, approaches with a plan, approaches kind of. You would be more of an architect than a gardener, right?
No, well, I don't know. I think I would start off with a theme, and I think the theme of this book is male mental health. The assassin was mentally ill, was very mentally ill, and was misunderstood all of his life, and eventually flipped and killed the president. And the main protagonist is going through a very serious midlife crisis, so he has his own mental illness. And male mental illness is something that's not really talked about or discussed, you know. So I wanted to have a look at that. That's the theme of the book. So that's kind of in the heart of the book. And then, you know, I'm building that into the historical and trying to parallel that in the modern as well.
Fantastic, yeah. So you were able to integrate your primary theme into the book as it progressed.
Hopefully, well, that's hope. If that's what the reader finds, well, then yes.
Yeah.
But if they don't find it, well, then no, you know.
Yeah. Yes. And this this area, has there been a lot written about Garfield? I don't know much about Garfield. Has there been much written about that period in terms of Garfield's assassination, or what would have been primary sources?
Well, there's academic books written about it, and there's some very good academic books written about it. But I'm not aware of any works of fiction about it. So I don't know.
So it's fertile ground then
well, as it happens, I stumbled across it, but maybe there are other books. But I've really looked into it, and I haven't found any. You find a lot about Lincoln. You find a lot about Kennedy, but you don't find too much about Garfield, or about McKinley, who was murdered in, I think, 1902. So you don't find much about him either.
Yes, there's several primary characters there, isn't there? In that kind of area.
I thought they were very interesting characters as I was researching them.
Yeah, because we do have. We've writers in the classes writing about different periods of history, American history, European history, and there's so much stuff to be written about there, and you've kind of tried. So that's. Is there any questions from our group? Might like to ask Owen.
How do you come up with the responses based on your historical data to answer questions like why do you think he killed me, and why do you think this happened on behalf of President Garfield?
Well, the answer to that question, and it's a very good question by the way, is that you don't really come up with answers. You come up with questions. Do you know what I mean? You're not there to provide answers. You're there to pose the question so the reader can decide themselves what their view is. It's not a book of instruction. It's just laying it out there, and then it's really, you might have a completely different perception than you would have. So I wasn't trying to find answers. I was kind of trying to find answers for myself, but in the book I wasn't trying to. There's no definitive conclusion to the book, other than say things like mental illness is quite a serious thing and we should pay more attention to it, that kind of thing. There's nothing as simple in life, is there? I mean, you never, and one of the things about writing is that, you don't have to provide answers. You can enjoy yourself just going on the journey.
I have just one more question. Do you format your conversations differently to try and differentiate between what your interviewer perceives as real life and what he perceives as talking to ghostly apparitions?
Now, what you do there is you look at the personalities who are having the conversation.
Sure.
And you look at how you would imagine personalities like that would interact with each other. So you kind of have to step into one character, then step out of that character and step into the other character. And in this book, I'm forming my opinion of the characters that I've researched based on my research. So all the language that these historical characters use is quite formal, because it's 19th century, and the only source I have for their conversation is what was formally written down, like their speeches in Congress and their articles and their political treatises and stuff like that they wrote. So the modern day guy, the protagonist, who's Richard, he's kind of speaking in modern enough language to them, even though he's a bit stuffy himself. But they're being very formal in response to him. So for me, if this answers your question, it's based on personality. I'm trying to get the little personality clashes and things together.
I see. It was more just work around when he actually interviews them. Do you format like how you write it, not write it, but how you present it? Like, do you do anything different with the text or the form or the style to make it
so that the reader knows it's happening?
Yes.
You kind of describe that in the book, and these characters creep up on him. There aren't kind of formal interviews. He could be like in one of the scenes, like he's just sitting in Stephen's Green, and there's a woman sitting beside him, and he doesn't know whether she's an apparition or whether she's an actual person. He's kind of a little bit awkward with her, wondering what she is, So they creep up on him, and they happen. And as the book progresses, they creep up on him in more extreme ways, to kind of reflect his growing, kind of losing his mind, increasingly. So, and he's, when he goes to the bathroom, they're walking up and down outside the door, kind of thing. He has no escape from them. But it's his conscience he can't escape from, in one sense.
And is all this before he assassinated Garfield, or is it afterwards?
Well, the protagonist didn't assassinate Garfield. It was the assassin, the person who assassinated was a man. The assassin was called Charles Guiteau, and he was really crazy, a very pathetic figure. You know, forgotten by society, completely delusional. And when he assassinated President Garfield, he was caught straight away, and then he was hanged a year and a day after the assassination. But he was crazy, like he shouldn't have been hanged. He should have been maybe treated, you know. But the way you know, a lot of people were treated very badly at that time. You know, if women were treated very badly, and I look at that in the book about the way women were treated. One of the characters in it is a woman called Kate Sprague, who was the daughter of a very senior politician. And because his wife was dead, she acted as the hostess in Washington for the soirees they used to have in those days. And she was a very beautiful woman and very popular. But then the man she was having the affair with, when he died, she was forgotten about, and she was just left to one side. And she has a long conversation with Richard, with the protagonist, about that, about the way women were treated at that time. You know, I don't know if it's any better now, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like, is it a problem for a writer writing about a different period of history where the kind of cultural norms are so different? I mean, like, people are treated differently. People are kind of not equal. Like, we don't have the same enlightenment like we have today of gender balance and all that kind of stuff. So do you think is it something that you tried to kind of stick with when you were writing those voices?
I think you have to, and it's very interesting because I just finished reading a biography of Charles Haughey. Okay, Bruce Arnold's biography of Charles Haughey, and I remember that a lot of people were very judgmental about Charles Haughey, probably for good reason, in fairness, but he was very much a man of his time. And we judge people from that period based on our value system today, which is a little unfair because it was a completely different culture. And that's definitely the case when you're writing about the 19th century. Religion is huge for them. They believe religion literally. You know, they believe that everything in the Bible is literally true, and they're uncompromising about that. They believe that black people are inferior. They believe that. It's not that they don't like black people or they think black people are this, that, or that. They just genuinely believe that they're inferior. Women are inferior. Like, this is their worldview. So you're working with that, which I find very interesting. And I wonder, have we made, you know, in a lot of areas, have we made that much progress? I don't know. Well, if you look at America, what's happening today in America, you'd wonder, are we making progress? You know, I don't know.
Oh, and your previous book, Number Games, is interesting there because, again, there's a gender question there. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but the main character is a man who is in a future society where men are the lower class, as it were, and you know, abused on the street and whatever. It's a switch in their gender roles as what we would have used to hear over the years. But that's interesting. That theme came through.
Yeah.
In the future, you know, the future.
Well, that's what I was trying to do there. I was trying to, you know, swap the positions between men and women in that book, just so that people get an idea, what, you know, how ridiculous prejudice is and how ridiculous it is. Like, if you think of a woman whistling at a man and then smacking him in the tushy, it's just ridiculous. Okay, but men do that to women all the time, and it's not considered ridiculous. It's considered offensive, but it's not considered ridiculous. But, you know, I think by reversing the roles in that book, Sean, you do. I was trying to highlight the ridiculousness of prejudice in that.
It's a very valuable thing to do as well. It's a great thing to do. Do you think, like, considering the society you're kind of writing about with regard to Richard, Ginny, and his wife Valerie, his lover Ginny, who's his assistant from the publishing company, and he's coming to do some work with them. Do you think, like, in the future, people writing about this time will be questioning our social norms, and are they kind of being kind of shown through that?
Well, I think the two-part question. I think definitely people are going to look back on this period, and they're going to write about it, and they're going to say, what were these people thinking? You know, for sure. There's things that we're doing we don't even know we're doing.
Yes.
That future generations. And it doesn't necessarily mean that society is going to get better either, because as this lady mentioned, what's going on in America seems that we're going backwards. So it could be in the future we're living in a very kind of backward society where things are much worse than they are now. There's no guarantee things are going to get better, to answer that point. On the second half of your question, which is whether they look at what Richard was doing with Jenny as something that was kind of specific to this time. I think outflas have been making passes at younger women for generations, and I think they'll continue to make passes at younger women for generations to come. I just wish more younger women would make passes at outflas. That would be a society I'd like to live in.
Yes, good, very good indeed. Just a few questions on writing. A lot of writers, a lot of people in my class would be interested to know the answers to this too. A practicing writer, somebody who's published novels. Do you write regularly? Are you writing at the moment? Are you writing every day? Could you tell us a bit about your writing practice?
Okay, so I'm working full time at the moment, and as I was telling you, Felicity, I'm going to be retiring in October, and I really am looking forward to that, so that I can write full time. At the moment, I write on a Saturday morning, on a Sunday morning, and I take Wednesday morning off, and I write on Wednesday morning. I just don't have the energy to write during the week when I've been working, during the day. You just don't. You can try, but you just won't be able to concentrate. And normally I find that I'm good for about 3 hours, maybe 4 hours. After that, I'm spent in a day. You just can't do it. And that's me.
Yeah.
Now, some people write at night, but I write early in the morning. So I'd be up and at my laptop at 7 o'clock in the morning on those days. I write for an hour. I take a 10-minute break and I write for another hour. And I take a 10-minute break and I write for another hour.
So it's like the extended Pomodoro technique.
I don't know what the Pomodoro technique is, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, he does 15 minutes, then a break, 5 minutes, then work for 15 minutes. Right.
Okay,
You're doing
sure.
that. Yeah, I do the same as you. Now we're take a break.
And do you find after 3 or 4 hours you're...
Oh no, definitely. I mean,
you're gone.
Most writers, I think that there's a few exceptions, but I mean, you wouldn't do 8 hours of writing.
You're tired, aren't you?
You wouldn't know what you're writing.
Well, you wouldn't be able to concentrate for that long.
No, it's so intense. Yeah, it's so intense. And then the revision process. Do you continue writing when you're revising, or do you focus for a period of time on revising your work?
Well, the way there's kind of different approaches I use at different times. My main approach is I get an idea in my head and I just start writing until I run out of steam. And then I leave it, I'd come back to it, I'd read it, and then maybe I'd write again until I had maybe the equivalent of maybe 3 or 4 chapters. And then I'd go back over the revision technique and I would do a lot of rewriting. And rewriting can mean taking things out as well as putting things in. So there is as you know, Mark, like 90% of it is rewriting and revision. You might, the most enjoyable part is the initial part when you're writing stuff down spontaneously. But the hard work is, and where things are really written, I think, is in the revision. Do you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the writing is thinking.
Yeah.
Writing it down, getting it down. So, do you then, like, when you think you're somewhere with it, have you got a reader? Do you share it with others, or do you wait?
Only Sean.
Just send it to Sean.
Just Sean. Yeah, Sean is the only person who has ever read anything that I've written before it was published.
Oh, very good.
My wife doesn't read. She has no interest in it. She read a short story I wrote years ago about a fella that murdered his wife, and she took it literally. So I got into trouble over that. So I would just, showing your stuff to friends and family, it doesn't really work, does it? I mean,
No,
they're
all
not.
going to say it's great.
They're all going to say it, and then you can show. I just don't. It's just for me, it's a private thing. I think you're better off finishing the book before you even talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a private thing, isn't it?
And when do you know it's ready to show to somebody?
Well, you never stop messing around with it. Like at some stage, you have to stop writing it. And when I feel it's up to a certain point, I'll just stop and I'll move on to another project, but I might come back to it. Like I thought that I had this book that I'm working on at the moment. I thought a couple of years ago, oh, that's finished, I'm going to move on from that. And then I started looking at it again, and I thought, Jesus, this is far from finished. But you just get so used to looking at it. You get so tired of looking at it. If you give yourself a break and you come back to it, you see something completely different.
Yeah, of course. And like, so that kind of leads in, have you got books abandoned that you're going to come back to later?
You have bits and pieces abandoned, but I wouldn't have a whole book abandoned, but I'd have bits and pieces and attempted starts and stuff like that abandoned in my own little slush pile, but not that much stuff, you know.
That's great. I mean, I think I've put you through enough now. So is there any further questions for Owen?
I was going to ask about genre, because we talked about that quite a lot on some of the things yesterday, and whether I get the impression you don't write to a particular genre, and I'm looking at the Garfield Conspiracy and Number Games, and anyone, a bookshop owner or a media person, would be like, okay, that's literary fiction or historical fiction, that's science fiction, and they're packaged in very different ways. But I get the impression, tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're writing a story, and see how it comes out. You're not writing for a particular box, as it were, or a particular genre.
No, you know, Sean, that I was, writing so long before I got published, that, being published was the last thing on my mind. I actually never thought I would be published. I didn't think it was possible to be published because, I was sending all these submissions out, rejection. I actually think you're lucky if you get a rejection. Most people just ignore you, So it's actually progress to get a rejection slip, So I was kind of writing away and wasn't writing for any particular box, just was writing away. I think the reason I write is because, I think I've got something, I know I've got something that I want to say. I don't know whether anybody else wants to listen to it, but you've things you want to say, you've ideas you want to put down, and everybody has a right to do that. Nobody can tell you can't do that. And I think mostly you have to write for yourself. If you're trying to write for other people or fit it into a genre or write a book that you think will make money, I mean, there's people can do it. I mean, there's kind of crafts people that work for Netflix and people that are brilliant at that, but that's not me. But if I never got published again, I wouldn't care. I'd still have my routine and I'd still write and I'd still try to get better, because I think trying to get better is what it's all about for me. And it's a never-ending journey, and it's a thankless task, but if you enjoy it, and you're getting something out of it for yourself, it can be very rewarding on a personal level.
Well, I always say to people that say, I don't know if I can write anymore, and they're talking to me while they're saying this, and they say, do you really have a choice? You don't really have a choice, so you're going to write it anyway. Thanks very much, Owen Dwyer.
Thanks, guys. This is my friend Marcin here. Marcin made a little trailer of this book. And I was going to ask if he'd play it for you. It's only 5 minutes long. Would that be okay? Yeah. He did a great job. He did a great job on it, in fairness to him. So.
What do you want me to say?
If this is one of your romantic notions, you better stop and think.
What pictures we hang? What perennials we put in the garden? The toilet paper we use?
Only because that you can't wipe your own arse. Have you any idea how difficult it is to manage you, the great author? Well, I'm not going along with this epic. Let's see how your new little piece of fluff can cope with the wonderful world of Richard Todd.
The life and trial of Charles Guiteau. There's something missing. Why did you kill him? I didn't kill him. You shot him in the Baltimore Potomac train station. I wasn't alone, you fool. You acted alone, you murdering bastard!
The Garfield Conspiracy by Owen Dwyer.
Well done, Marcin. Well done. So that's it, folks. Just enjoy that.
So thanks
Not
again.
at all. My
for a
pleasure.
wonderful
My
interview.
pleasure.
very
Thanks,
much.
guys. Lovely to talk to you.
Everyone, wishing you a great night.
Never did have anything against Garfield,